So the first talk in this session is by Hiroki Nomoto. The title is Bare Passive Agent Hierarchy.
I'm sorry for the trouble. I'm going to talk about bare passive agent hierarchy today. So let me start with the definition of what I mean by bare passive. So the bare passive is also known as passive type 2, passive sumo, zero passive object, or object voice construction. Number one summarizes the defining property of bare passives. So there's no overt voice morphology on verb, as in the Indonesian example in 2. The internal argument behaves as a subject. The external argument occurs right in front of, is adjacent to the verb. So an Indonesian has a verbal inflection like this. So here, there's no man or D voice marker involved. Of the study, when I talk about bare passives in standard Malay, people often say something like only pronouns are allowed as the agent, right? And in my heart, I say, why do people always keep saying this? So, but I know that it's obviously from their knowledge about standard Indonesian, what they have read from literatures on standard Indonesian. Because standard Indonesian bare passive agents are restricted to pronouns or pronoun substitutes, as in for. So in for, the agent is bapa, meaning father, and in this sentence, this bapa can only be interpreted as referring to the second person and cannot be interpreted as meaning father. However, as far as I know, no such restriction exists in standard Malay.
Hiroki, I don't know if you can hear us, but we can step through your handout. That may work better.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I will look at my own handout locally.
Great.
We're in section right in front of section 2. So in this study, I show that the standard Malay type is the norm based on a cross-linguistic survey. And based on the cross-linguistic survey, I propose an implicational hierarchy of possible bare passive agents. I will present an analysis of bare passives and their cross-linguistic variations. So the cross-linguistic survey. So I looked at a number of languages, but there's no systematic sampling. I basically looked at languages in Malaysia and Indonesia. And also I chose languages for which grammar descriptions are readily available. The problem was not all grammar descriptions explicitly state the restriction on possible and impossible bare active agent. So I had to figure that out myself through examples. But what is impossible often remained unclear. Before moving on to bare passives, I want to draw your attention to the distinction between bare active and bare passive. Because to identify bare passives, you first need to check whether a language has bare actives. So bare actives are active clauses. It's similar to, it sometimes looks like bare active when the agent is adjacent to the verb. So for languages with bare actives, bare passives need to be distinguished from bare actives. The distinction is easy when adverb, auxiliary, and negation is present, as in 7. So in this Indonesian example, the adverb sudah comes between the agent and the verb. If you apply topicalization to this, you get 7b, and the auxiliary adverb is still there. The bare passive corresponding to 7a is still clearly different because of the position of the already. However, without this element, the distinction becomes difficult. So if you look at examples in 8, the agent comes before the bear verb, and the patient is in the front. And here you are not sure whether this is a bare active or bare passive clause. Unfortunately, most grammar descriptions lack information about bare active, so I needed to figure it out from the available examples. Philippine languages, basically I didn't look at them, but some sentences resemble bare passives, like the theme voice sentence in Tagalog in 9. So here the voice doesn't have any voice marker, the agent comes adjacent to the verb, the patient is in the nominative. So here's the result. It's very clear that the Indonesian type, as in 10A, is the minority and 10B is the majority. And when I look closely into possible bare passive agents, I found the implicational hierarchy in 11. So in this hierarchy, if a language allows the item in a slot as bare passive agent, it will also allow the items to the left of that slot. 12 lists the languages that belong to each category. So A, B, D, E, F, G. H has the most languages. And if you can, as you can see clearly, the norm is the system of group H, where the requirement of bare passive agents is simply that they must be overt. So I gave examples for each group. So group A is standard Indonesian. If you're interested, please look at the examples later. Group B, Sama Bangini. For this language, a gold states that first and second person clitic pronouns are possible, but he also writes something like this. The passive-like marker in or ni is preferred but not required when the agent is a third-person pronoun, which is a clitic. So here I consider the absence of this voice marker not as its omission, but as the presence of bare passives. So if you look at examples in 15, so 15A is the example given by Gold. So here you have the infix in, and according to our goals, in is optional in this case. So when this morpheme doesn't appear, you get 15B. In this sentence, 15B looks like bare passive. So I consider this as a bare passive rather than omission of in from morphological passive. Group C, unfortunately, I haven't found it yet. Standard group D, standard Indonesian, we have seen it already. Group E is Madriese. Madriese allows a small set of kinship terms like father. Group F is the Malay variety discussed by Guilfoyle. According to them, as in 17A, the proper names are possible, but definite noun phrases like lelaki itu are not. Group G versus Group H. Here we see a construction-based split. In Balinese, a monotransitive clause cannot have a definite agent. As in 18, so as in 18A, you cannot have a definite agent. But if you look at ditransitive clauses, in 19, you have a quantified phrase by every. So this is a strong NP, noun phrase, quantified noun phrase. So it's a definite noun phrase. Group H is the majority. Here I gave an example from colloquial Indonesian. You can see that person, the person, clearly a DP. In group H, the agent can be covered as in 21. Now I will present analysis of the bare passives. First, I will look at the default case, and then I will consider special cases. So for the bare passive, the passive syntax comes from little v past. This is identical to Aldridge's v ergative. Passive v differs from past active voice in its case licensing property, no structural accusative case, but it has inherent ergative case, which is assigned to speculative VP. Both passive and active V project a specifier, so both are transitive syntactically as well as semantically. So the licensing of the agent is done as in 22. As you can see, I posit a voice layer above little vp. This is because in my previous studies, I found semantic contributions of this, the morphemes belonging to this head. And the voice head selects for the type of little vp as shown in 23. So if you have if the verb moves to little v, the word order you get will be patient agent verb as in 25 standard Indonesian, and the verb moves farther to voice, then you'll get patient verb agent order. Here I have a couple of languages. Balinese as in 27. Sarawak Malay also have the agent order. Standard Indonesian here is not an example of morphological passive, but an example of the morphology. This is an example of the morphological passive. But I argue that the same verb movement occurs here. This is why I posit little voice here to get the right word order. And classical Malay also shows that this verb movement is taking place. The difference between groups H and I was that group I can have a covert agent, and group I is very rare, but group H was very common. To account for this difference, I claim that a covert pronoun is exclusive to morphological passives in group H. Classical Malay provides evidence for the agent denoting pro in morphological passives. So 31A is just like an English passive with a by phrase following the passive verb form. But here I posit a pro because classical Malay also had passive types, as in 31B, where the agent occurs overtly, but the by phrase still occurs together with the overt agent after the verb. With regard to the phonological realization of voice and spec little vp, the languages seem to follow the pattern in 32. So if the voice head is covered, agent DP is overt. But if the voice head is overt, agent DP tends to be covert. Group 1 deviates from this general pattern, as in 33. And I claim that this is the reason why group I is rare. And the hybrid type morphological passive in classical Malay also deviates from this pattern, as in 34. And because of this deviation, this hybrid pattern has disappeared. And the pattern 32 probably has bearing on the following common views. First, passives are intransitive, or little v passive doesn't project a specifier. Second, passive markers often develop from agent pronouns. Now let's look at the special cases. For groups A through F, the part of the hierarchy for these groups resembles Silverstein's hierarchy of split ergativity, which says nominals higher in the hierarchy are less likely to be realized as ergatives as opposed to nominative. So Silverstein's hierarchy could provide a functional motivation for the special behaviors of these groups. So here I claim that little v passive in these groups lacks inherent ergative case, because these are things that do not like ergative very much. Since the default case licensing is unavailable, an alternative mechanism is called for. And one promising strategy is licensing by adjacency by Levin. So according to Levin, head-head adjacency is employed in place of case licensing. And if you look at A through D and F, the agent consists only of a D head, and E for E, the was involved only consists of a single word. So this seems plausible. For group G, I really don't have any idea, but yeah, I don't have any idea why this happens in the first place or how to explain it. How much time do I have?
Feel free to take another minute or two if you want, Hiroki.
Okay, thank you. So summary, I'll skip this. So implications. We saw that Mualan allows bare passives with a covert agent. So the overtness of the agent, which people often include in the definitions of bare actives, should not be included in the definition. Second, to the extent that bare passives are related to English type passives, as we saw in classical Malay, an ergative analysis of bare passive a la Aldrich is may be valid for passives in general. Thank you. Sorry for the trouble.
No, sorry for trouble on our end as well. And thank you very much. So we have 10 minutes for questions. And if you have a question, please indicate so in the chat. We have a question from Carly Summerlot, if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, thanks. This was a really interesting talk.
Thank you.
I have both one comment to add to your hierarchy, and then I have a question about a piece of data you have. I can tell you that there are 5 languages in Borneo that fall under group H. They allow definites. So I do think that that is the most common pattern. So I just thought that would be kind of interesting. I have data on those if you want me to send it to you. My question is about number 29. You have a standard Indonesian D passive, and you're claiming that this kind of falls into the same pattern as we see in the bare passive in standard Indonesian. And I'm kind of curious about your analysis there, because most D passives are analyzed as having an adjunct as an agent, because you can have ole, the by preposition, taking that instead. So I was curious if you could talk a little bit about your analysis of that as not being an oblique, but actually being an argument in those questions.
All right. Yeah, so a lot of people cite Arca and Manning for the oblique status of the bare DP agent. Well, some people say it's not a DP but PP, but this bare agent. Then I I recently examined the binding facts again, and I again found that the argument has a problem. That's one reason, and another reason for claiming that it's an argument is based on the nominalization test by Cole, Herman, and Yanti, and maybe Tim Makinen. So if you apply, I can't remember what exactly the test was like, but if you apply the test to this type without by preposition, it behaves like an argument. These are two reasons I claim that this is an argument rather than an adjunct. So if you're interested, I can send my paper.
Yeah, I would really be interested. I can exchange emails later. I would really appreciate that.
That would be cool.
Yep.
We have plenty of time for questions. I can ask a question
Sure.
if we have time. So the apparent complementarity of the voice and the agent that you see in many cases. So I'm thinking of, this is my screen. I'm thinking of so this generalization, this table in 31, for example. So in this kind of case that we saw, is that something that we might want to relate to the doubly filled comp filter? I mean, under this analysis, that would not be the right kind of configuration. But
not sure.
Yeah, so I was curious about that.
Yeah, so I was wondering why this this must be the case, and one possibility I came up with was is something related to acquisition or processing. When children learns the passives, two types of passive, they must be able to figure out which is which. I haven't figured this thoroughly yet. So one possibility is some connection to acquisition. If you have this, it may be easier for children to acquire two types of passives.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. We have another 5 minutes or so for questions. I think Paul has a question.
Yeah, thank you. I was following up on Carly's question. Hiroki, what you said just now about the bapa, the bare noun as an agent of the D passive, part of your argument to say that it's a core argument, I guess, rather than an oblique was, I mean, argument versus adjunct is one distinction, but in the Manning and Arca paper, I think they were arguing it's something like an oblique argument. It's still part of argument structure, but it's not core. And that was what their binding fact was supposed to prove. Mm-hmm. So you were challenging the binding fact because the bapa could be the antecedent, like himself was praised by bapa or something like that.
Himself.
that bare agent of the passive, and I forget what number we're on. 39, I believe it was.
39. 20, sir?
29. Let me, sorry, yes, 29, you're right, sorry, 29.
Oh, 29.
Surat ini harus ditanda tangani Bapak. You said Manning and Arca argued that that's an oblique, not rather than a core argument, because it can't function as an antecedent or reflexive. But you found the facts were different?
So, I can't remember that. So the example was like, himself was surrendered by
Yes.
Papa, something like this, right?
Right. I found a bunch of natural examples where a ole prepositional agent of the D passive can bind something within its own clause, even the subject of its own clause, if there's no other syntactically prominent potential binder, potential antecedent. Now, I mean, what I think I found, what I tried to argue in Taipei, was that the ICAL in Taipei or the AFLA in Taipei? Anyway, was that if there's no syntactically accessible antecedent, then you can get like discourse antecedents or something, even with the ole prepositional argument of the D passive. So the binding facts by themselves may not rule out the idea that this is, it really is functioning like a PP agent. It may not be different in status whether the preposition is there or not.
So what I can remember about my own analysis was I looked at binding condition C about referential expressions. So I looked at whether Bapa can be bound by a pronoun. So that's how I can talk to you later in details with examples.
Yeah, okay, so that's a different issue. That's an interesting question.
Thank you. I want to call on Yining.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I was wondering, so you distinguish voice and little v as having different syntactic contributions in the syntax, and I was wondering if you could say just a few comments on elaborating what their different contributions are.
So they are different. So I distinguish two kinds of things. One is the thing, the head that deals with voice syntax. I make little v do this syntax, and the voice head, I wasn't sure whether I should name this voice because it can be misleading, but I named it voice anyway because these markers are often called voice markers. This functional head above little vp is sensitive to the voice, but the voice doesn't trigger voice syntax by itself. It's just sensitive to voice. Does it make sense? One is doing the voice syntax by itself. Another is sensitive to the distinction made by little v. And because voice is sensitive to little v, voice is often analyzed as the voice marker. That's how I see these two.
Yeah, thanks. It's intriguing that your bare active and passive allows either the active or passive little v, and the other two are more selectionally restricted. And I would suggest looking at Idemar Kastner's work, where he also posits three flavors of voice, and those constrain the voice system. He proposes this for Hebrew, but there seem to be reflexes in Austronesian as well.
Can I
Thank
ask you to send the reference later? Yeah.
I can.
Great. Thank you very much. So let's thank the speaker and move to the next talk.